Good afternoon. This is Afsaneh Beschloss, CEO of the Rock Creek Group. As we head into the final quarter of the year, several market-moving events are on the horizon. First and foremost, of course, we've got the U.S. presidential elections around the corner, and the two candidates present starkly different platforms and visions for America's role in the world. Polls and debates have already been moving markets in the run-up to the election, with the Mexican peso serving as a proxy for who's ahead. From a monetary policy standpoint, there are two Fed meetings, one in November and one in December, with the consensus probability of a rate hike before year end being close to 60% at the moment. Additionally, Europe and UK continue to deal with the aftermath of Brexit, and with the announcement this week at the Conservative Party conference by Prime Minister Theresa May, indicating that the UK will begin extracting itself from the EU by the end of March 2017. All of us also have been very busy this week with the annual meetings of the World Bank and the IMF, and there have been a lot of interesting discussions going on, so I'm sure we will touch on those too. Alan, if you don't mind, to open with you and to see really if there is any evidence today that the uncertainty around the election today is any different, and is it impacting markets any differently this time around?
Business confidence is suppressed at this stage. It's true, but it's been suppressed for quite a significant period of time. And what's going on now cannot help. So I know the direction, but I can't put a number on it.
One of the candidates, Donald Trump, is talking very much about big tax cuts as a way of unleashing growth, and has invoked the name of Ronald Reagan in terms of advancing his economic program. Would you compare those two?
No. Let me tell you exactly why. Reagan is well known for coming into office, elected in 1980, and having a fairly significant, detailed program with a very large tax cut in it. And it just so turns out that I was involved in actually building the budget which was presented to the president. We presented it to Reagan. He looked at it and says, "This is pretty tough. Just answer one question. Is everyone equally harmed by this particular budget?" It was a very tough budget, and it was the budget in full detail which was presented to the Congress. And they passed the tax cuts, but they didn't pass the budget. So in a sense, what is missing here is that Trump is not following. He's not giving the downside of what he's talking about is a significant increase in defense and a significant cut in taxes. Now, the only way you can do that is to repeal the laws of arithmetic or cut spending.
What Donald Trump is proposing is we will have a very significant tax cut, and we will grow our way out of it. We will grow our way out of it. We will deregulate our way out of it. And we will also do penny savings in each department on non-defense discretionary spending. His plan by the Committee for a Responsible Budget, which has become the arbiter of measuring these budgets. Given what we know, the lack of detail, contrast to the Reagan budget, the estimate is it adds $5.3 trillion to the federal debt over 10 years, whereas Hillary's plan adds about $200 billion, because she actually has been saying for everything she proposes, yes, she will spend more, yes, government spending will be higher, but she will pay for that in a variety of very well documented ways.
One of the topics that Secretary Clinton has been talking about is more public-private partnerships to build infrastructure in particular, green economy, and vocational training. These investments, are they good investments? How are we going to pay for them?
So Again, I would say, so let's just start with a general point about infrastructure. It's very interesting to note that in the last several years, there has really come, it's central now to IMF discussions, it's central discussions of central banks around the world. The notion is that we have real infrastructure investment needs, and that in economies which are operating below potential, where monetary policy really can't do much more, that a very wise move would be to take government budgets and allocate more to infrastructure, where there is, as the IMF would say, fiscal space, funding that by additional borrowing. Now, it turns out that in the plan that Senator Clinton is putting forward, there's actually some upfront initial, but it's really she very quickly has a whole set of proposals to pay for her infrastructure.
Fiscal space is an illusion. There is no fiscal space.
All right, well.
Nobody has mentioned what the problem is, and it's the aging of the developed world and what we call entitlements in the United States. And we're getting to the point now where the social benefits in all of these countries, specifically in the United States, where the data are very clear but true very much across the developed world, social benefits are crowding out gross domestic savings. We're finding a very high correlation between productivity on the one hand, productivity growth on the other hand, one hand, and capital investment are going a step back, entitlements. There is no room for any other things. We haven't even touched what the problem is. And to go through this whole political campaign and the word entitlement being mentioned at no time is a political disgrace.
But most investors out there, sort of looking into the next really 3 to 10 years even, are expecting lower returns, whether they're managing big pension plans or endowments or foundation assets or sovereign funds. They don't expect the kind of returns they've seen in the last 20 years.
There's no doubt that that is the case, but remember, pension funds used to have a rate of return of 8%
Yes.
or something all the time. They don't meet it, and the result is that if you look at state pension funds, they're in terrible shape. Why? Because they're unfunded. And I don't see how we're going to get around this until we get to a normal rate of return on intermediary assets.
There's been a lot that we've all read about Janet Yellen coming under attack during the debates when she's been called a partisan. Laura, do you think investors should be worried about sort of the anti-Fed rhetoric in the presidential campaign, or it doesn't really make any difference? It is rhetoric.
One of the things that I'm most proud of when I was in government, and I was very proud of my administration, was really to honor the independence of the Fed and really not ever to say anything publicly to criticize the Fed, and that this, we feel, and I continue to feel, is an important part of the basic underlying stability of the U.S. financial system. I think investors should be worried about the general assault on the independence of the Fed, or the general lack of confidence in central banks around the world.
Do you agree the long-term neutral rate is low by historical standards? And the nominal rate is only modestly accommodative, or do you think this sort of neutral rate is where we are is the new normal?
What is remarkable is that interest rates are roughly where they have been for generation on generation. Mm-hmm. I think that we've pressed rates down inordinately. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a new normal. I think human nature has not changed. Time preference hasn't changed. The rates of return on an equity investment have not changed. Mm-hmm. My only forecast is that interest rates will eventually return to human normal, if I may put it that way.
Sort of looking at the implications of a hard Brexit, which seems to be where we are now, do you think that financial markets have now sort of starting to stabilize in terms of the way they look at Brexit, or where are investors going?
At the moment, obviously, sterling's taken the brunt of the impact. The UK economy is doing fine despite the doomsday scenarios, and I think that's probably because unemployment's still relatively low and employment strong. Wealth effects have not kicked in yet. People feel fine, so they're continuing to consume. I think once we go through time, I think investment will start declining. FDI is going to impact it. The wealth effects are going to come in with a 20% devaluation of sterling, and that is going to inevitably have a negative impact on the UK. I think the key to me, the concern right now, is really the tail risk in all this, because it's difficult to know where things go, and I think, frankly, the only thing we know with certainty is we don't know anything. But there could be some seriously negative scenarios. There may be small probability. In the UK, you obviously you could have a very hard Brexit where they're going to have to come out completely without having any sort of agreement in place. That could have very severe consequences, particularly for the financial services industry. In the case of Europe, even lower probability, but even worse, is that could this be the precursor to Europe beginning to have much more difficulty maintaining its cohesiveness? The most likely scenario is going to be some sort of free trade agreement between the UK and Europe. And what, for me, is more worrisome is actually not the tariffs. Because, I mean, the tariffs are not going to be huge under WTO anyway. It's the non-tariff barriers, which are going to be much more significant. And particularly if you look at the service industry and the financial services industry, there are 5,500 UK firms that have passporting into Europe. They have 366,000 licenses, passports. You're going to have to figure out how you deal with that. You have the same on the other side of the fence. If you look at, for example, there's a recent study came out by Oliver Wyman in terms of the impact on the financial service industry. If you take a sort of a benign scenario, the impact is relatively modest on the financial services industry. If you take a really hard exit where you don't have passporting, it's 30,000 jobs in this financial services industry directly, plus another 30,000 jobs in ancillary businesses, $10 trillion, $1 billion worth of pounds worth of tax reductions for banks directly, and another 10 ancillary. You're talking about significant declines in revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is going to, it depends very much on where we're going to end up. I hope, again, on the hopeful side, an FTA, a transitionary arrangement, so we can gap that, and in the case of financial services, which is so critical to the UK, 10% of GDP, is some sort of move towards equivalence.
Alan, you get the last word. You said when Brexit happened that it was among the worst political decisions in your public service career. What do you think today?
Remember that the United Kingdom held the Western world together financially for generations. And to see it come apart, because remember, the concern at the point of Brexit, and still an issue, is will Scotland follow? Will Northern Ireland follow? It's scary. That's what I can say.
Well, I think that's unfortunately our last word today.